Yeah. So the short story is I got my PhD in developmental psychology in 2019, and if you've ever gone through a PhD program or been in higher ed, the expected career path after a PhD is to become a faculty member, a professor at a university. So that was what I was planning to do for the whole time I went through my PhD program. I got a prestigious fellowship after that, which started right before COVID. And after 3 years of that, I realized that I didn't really want that career anymore. So I did a really difficult career change that has, a lot of like emotions and stigma around it. And it was really hard, and I started posting on what was Twitter about I'm leaving academia. This is why. This is my process. And then a lot of people started reaching out to me and asking for my help. And so I helped people for free for about 2 years, met with about 100 people for free, did resume reviews. And then once I started posting on LinkedIn, my account blew up there. And then all of a sudden, it was just a lot of people wanted my help, and I didn't have the time and wondered, I wonder if anyone would actually pay me to help them. So then about a year ago is when I decided, I'm going to create a career development program for PhDs who are wanting to change careers out of higher ed. Who wants to try out this program with me? And so that's how all of this started. And my first cohort in the program was almost a year ago. So that's the short version. And while I had started this program, I had also had moved through multiple 9 to 5 jobs. And it was in June of this year that I decided that I wanted to go into my business full time. So this was never intended to be, never imagined myself as a business owner or an entrepreneur. Thought business was super boring until I was actually in it and doing it. And now I'm like, oh, this is actually fun. And yeah, that's, so it's also been about, whatever, 3 or 4 months of me doing this full time and, you know, struggling through this first year business like I think we all do.
Yeah, so struggling through this first year of business, being paid full time at it, right?
Yeah.
And before that, doing it basically on a free basis. So the people that you worked with for free, how did
Mhm.
they find you? Was it just they started like were you already connected with them, or was it just the Twitter
It
situation?
was it was just Twitter. Yeah. So Twitter, and then on LinkedIn, I have like today I have 60,000 followers on LinkedIn, and then close to 40 on Twitter or X or whatever it is now. And yeah, so I was invited to, give a lot of talks. I've been on a lot of podcasts. I've now been publishing in journals like Science, and I should have another career essay coming out in Nature pretty soon. So I think people, and at this point, like I think people just know who I am because
Mm.
I've been doing this for about 3 years, at least in terms of just like posting on social media. But that is how like most people find me.
So when it comes to that first paid client, how
Hmm.
did that conversation go? And how did you transition from I'm doing this for free and now I have too many people I'm doing this with
Yeah.
to that I need to charge money for this? Like how did that process and that conversation go?
Yeah. Yeah, after I started writing on LinkedIn, my account went from like 0 to 20,000 followers in like a month. It was really rapid. And I actually ended up taking like a 9 month break from all social media immediately after that. And I questioned whether or not I actually wanted to come back at all because it had become a lot. I was pouring a lot of time into it. And so I told myself I'm only going to come back and do this if I am paid. And otherwise, it's just not worth it. So I started off with, I've been doing one on one meetings for free. I started off by like, saying, hey, who wants to pay me, $50 for like a 30-minute meeting. So I started with that. And then immediately I actually ended up working with a business LinkedIn coach, like someone I had met on LinkedIn who had developed a coaching program that I I saw it and I was like, this seems like something that I could build myself and do. So that is my main service that I offer now. It is essentially a course, a curriculum that's hosted on Circle, but there's a community built around it. I didn't just want to do a digital course. There's so many digital courses, super low completion rates. There's no help when you need it, and there's just like no community at all. So I didn't want to go that route. So that's the program that I have currently. So it is a group program. People can also add on like individual one-on-one meetings with me if they want, but I find that the group structure is usually enough for people to learn everything they need to in the curriculum, ask me questions if they get stuck. And then I have office hours and various things that I can do to help people along the way.
Yeah, that's huge. Like as a course builder, I always tell people exactly what you're talking about, Ashley. Like, okay, listen,
Yeah.
you can just build a course, but it's like publishing a book on Amazon. What do you think is going to
Yeah.
happen? Right? Like there's
Oh,
so
yeah.
many courses, no one's doing them. If you want to actually make an impact, there has to be some sort of component where people can interact with either you or each other or both. And then I love your upsell into
Mm-hmm.
buying one-on-one time with you or deep dives or whatever. So back rolling back the clock to your $50, 30 minutes. I think that's what you said.
Yeah.
Did I
And
get
then
that right?
yeah. And then the first iteration of my program, it was like, I think it was $300 for a 3-month program that was pretty intensive on my end in terms of like the amount of help I was giving people.
Mm.
And I had 50 people in that first cohort. So
Oh my
it was,
gosh, that's
it
so
was,
many.
it was a lot. Yeah, I definitely like, I think made some mistakes in that first one for sure.
Well, tell me about those mistakes and what you learned.
Yeah, I think the first one was, I think my biggest mistake over the past year was pushing myself too hard. And I also found out in this process, I think it was November last year, I was late diagnosed autism and ADHD. So that really has, I think, colored my whole like ability to do work and my experience of burnout. But I had a 9 to 5 job. And so I was doing a lot of this on, I worked on the weekends a lot. I worked evenings a lot, just working a lot during that 3 month period. And then I also, like, when this cohort was ending, I thought, I was like, I'm just going to immediately do like another cohort. I didn't really give myself a break at all. And then continued to, after that second cohort ended, I was like, I'm just going to do a third one. I'm just going to keep going. And by, I think it was March or April of this year, I was like, I feel so burnt out. And then when May rolled around, I was like, I think I need to pick between this and my full time job because I feel like I'm just failing at everything. So rolling back the clock, I think I would have just slowed down a lot and realized that I didn't really have to push myself that hard. I think I would have done a little more planning before I just like opened the program, so I wouldn't have had to work as much as I was doing, or just even set like a time limit of like, I'm not gonna work on the weekends. I'm only gonna do this like 5 to 10 hours a week, just setting some parameters because I let it take over my whole life until I burnt out really badly.
Mm. So after doing 3 cohorts in a row,
Hmm.
did you take a break or and how did you decide to come back after that?
Yeah, so the third cohort ended in like the end of April, and then it was like my birthday was in May, so it was like around my birthday when it kind of be I was like, I know people kept asking me like, when are you gonna have the next one? I'm like, I don't know. I feel like so bad right now. And and then it kind of became clear in May that I had to pick. I had to, I don't know. I started feeling like I really wanted to do this full time and wasn't really as invested in my full time job as I wanted to be. So I ended up in June, at the very beginning of June, deciding to leave my 9 to 5. So then I opened a fourth cohort in like mid end of June. But I feel like the burnout's gotten better now that I have like I don't work on the weekends anymore. Like that's a very hard
Mm,
rule that I have. And whatever work I get done during the week, like that's what I get during the week, and I don't work on the weekends. But I still struggle with burnout a bit, but I think it's like a neurodivergent burnout instead of like a working too much burnout.
that's a really interesting distinction. Um, that that moment when you if there was a moment when you realized I'm not that fired up about this 9 to 5 and I am fired up about this thing that I'm doing over here,
Mm-hmm.
what was that like in here?
Oh, it was a moment. I mean, I think people had asked me from the time I started this business, like, when are you going to do this full time? Like, when are you going to do this full time? Like my other friends who had their businesses, I'm like, I don't know that I want to. Like, I'm a scientist by training. Like, I didn't want to be a career like a career coach. Like, I don't have. I am going to be pursuing coaching certification because I believe that it's important, but I currently didn't have it, and um, but I remember I had been hired at my last company to work on a specific project, and then it I was going to be pulled off of this project, and part of the reason I just it was for a variety of reasons. I don't think I had the expertise to really lead this project, but I was also feeling really burnt out, and I think that was impacting my performance at work. So my manager had kind of had sent another message to me and someone on my team saying, I don't think you should be leading this project. And at that point, it was that, and then a few days prior to that, someone else in Karen Kelsky, who runs the professor, is in. She's like a very big name in the space. And so she actually had been chatting with me, wanting to collaborate with me. And we were like finalizing that. So those two things happened. And then it kind of became clear that I was feeling too burnt out. And if I had to pick one, I was going to pick my business. So I ended up sending an email to my managers like a week before my birthday. And then one of them was like chatting with me. And I was just like, I was on a plane to like the East Coast, and I was just like crying on this plane like the whole time. And I was just feeling like really sad, like really scared, knowing that this is like really what I wanted to do, but also just like, is this going to work? Is this going to like be a complete failure? But yeah, I was went through like a lot in that process of deciding to do this full time.
That is such a scary moment of like, okay, I'm taking the leap. And what if this doesn't work out?
Yeah.
And what if it does work out? That's also scary, right? In its own way,
Yeah.
because like now I'm not a scientist anymore, right? Like and you
Yeah.
are, but you aren't, right?
Yeah, and I mean, I think the thing that I had worried about most was, money and making enough money. And I think that's also, again, kind of like another mistake that I had made was I think I probably if I had worked less, I don't think I would have felt as burnt out, and I probably could have stayed in my 9 to 5 for like a little while longer, which in retrospect would have made more financial sense. And I'm actually I'd applied for it. I'm about to start a 6 month contract at Meta because I live in Seattle. It's really expensive. If I lived in a different city, or my partner is also finishing his last year of school right now, so it's just in the first year of business, I'm doing, I think most people would consider to be like pretty well, like in terms of money, but it is just not enough for me and my partner to like live comfortably in Seattle right now. So that's like part of why I'm taking this short-term contract. But I'm also, thinking about where do I want my career to be in like 3 to 5 years? And those are questions that I don't really have good answers to right now. Because there's like so many different ways that I could take this business or scale this, and then I keep going back to like, do I did I really want to be a career coach for PhDs specifically? That was like never my career intention. So
Mm,
um there's just, yeah, lots of questions that like swirl in my brain.
sure. Yeah. Sounds like a very normal entrepreneurial journey.
Yeah, I had like a business coach, or have a business coach who had showed me, it was like the emotional roller coaster of a startup founder graph, and it like goes up and then it goes down, and it's like you're in the pit. He's like, you're in the pit of despair right now. And I'm like, wait, this is normal? Like, it's normal to feel like this? And I mean, he's been in business for 20 years now, and he's like, yeah, the first like year, 3 years, you're kind of just like stumbling around in the dark. And I'm like, God, so I get frustrated. I'm like, why can't I figure this out now? And I mean, it's comforting to know that this is normal, but at the same time, just like, I wish this weren't so hard right now. I wish this were easier.
Yeah. Well, and I think those of us who are ADHD also get really big swings of emotions, even without the added thing of entrepreneurship. Like, it's like,
Yeah.
everything's incredible. I am like so making it. And then the next day you're like, I should just get a job. What am I doing? Like,
I know, and I mean, I was just joking well, one of my like my good friends, we've been friends for like a decade now. I was telling him it was September, and he was like, "Yeah, it's been like 3 months since you've done this full time. So every 3 months, like time to do something new, time to get a new job." And I'm like, it's so true. Like that's been my life for the past 3 years. Like the first 3 months, I'm just so like dopamine, like so interested. Everything's new, and then the novelty wears off, and then I'm just like,
Mm.
oh, is this really what I want to be doing? And I think finding ways to keep it like new and interesting. And also, I recently hired a VA because there's just some like operations tasks that I just really struggle to do, because it's just not that interesting to me.
Yeah, I think there's a threshold of sort of leaving the solopreneur mindset of like,
Hmm.
there are things like that where not only am I not into them, I'm terrible at them and I hate them. Like
Yeah.
the energy drop of accounting for me. And some people absolutely love accounting, like that's their whole life's purpose. And the more I go down this journey of like, okay, whose life's purpose is this? Like, who can I give this to? It's incredible at it and loves to do it, where I get to spend my time on highly, to use like crazy business stuff, highly leveraged activities, zone
Hmm.
of genius activities, things
Yeah.
that do give me that dopamine rush, where I can say, I've got a creative idea, but I don't want to finish it. I want to get it like 80% of the way there and give it to someone else so that they can
Yeah.
finish it. Like that's, it's so
Yeah.
nice.
It's hard. I mean, the classic behavioral interview question, what's your greatest weakness? Mine has and has always been I have a really hard time delegating work. And I have like I have standard of how I like doing things, and
Mm,
it's really hard to pass that off to other people. But it's gotten to the point, especially with the amount of messages I receive on LinkedIn
yeah.
specifically. It's very, very hard for me to keep up with them. And I need to pass off like some of these other things because I can do it, but like you said, it's what I really want to be doing with my time is like writing and like writing a book, and I can't do that if I'm spending hours every week like responding to emails and doing other like operations tasks.
Yeah. So, with all the messages you're getting on LinkedIn, it sounds like that is still like your best channel for finding new people, reaching new people. Are there other channels that still work really well for you?
Yeah, so I I mean, I was more active on like Twitter or X, and the platform's changed a lot in the last couple of years. So it's not, I think I will go back there at some point when I am, I will be finally starting this podcast that I've been putting off in about a month. And so once I have like the videos going along with that, then I think it'll make more sense to go back there. The reach can be like pretty substantial on Twitter still, and driving like a lot of people to my website. But yeah, Instagram, like I've been like a bit active on there as well. I have about like 4,000 followers there, but I kind of had taken a break. But given my niche right now, like LinkedIn makes the most sense for career coaching because everyone will be on LinkedIn at some point. But I really would like to start adding, you know, other resources to my website to come up in Google searches. I think that would be really useful. That's actually how I found my business coach who does like ADHD business coaching. I just like searched that in Google. He was one of the first people comes up, and he was like, "Yeah, that's how I get almost all of my clients is through Google." And he's just like not on social media. Um, I'm in a newsletter intensive right now where they really talk about ads and like advertising for newsletters specifically because the person who runs this doesn't like being on social media. So I think I might do that as well because I also don't really like being on social media, which might surprise some people, but it can be really stressful and like, yeah. So those are other avenues that I'm considering in the future as well.
So right now, it sounds like you don't do like advertising on LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter,
Mm-mm.
X. You just, it's all organic reach. You just
Yeah.
being you, posting
Hmm.
cool stuff, and people just interact with it. So do you do any ads of any kind right now?
No, not really. With Karen, who runs the Professor is in, she has a Facebook group called The Professor is Out, which has about 35,000 people.
I
And
love
so
that
she has
name.
been so she's been advertising my program there. I think what I'm going to switch to pretty soon is not advertising my program, but advertising my newsletter. I think given the cost of my program, I've realized that even though people are coming to my website, the sales are not converting at the rate that I would expect. And I imagine that there needs to be more nurturing before people are ready to buy. So I'm going to be prioritizing growing my email list, which is another thing that I wish I would have done way sooner instead of
Mm.
just, thinking that social media was fine. Like, you don't own your audience on social media. Like, your email list is extremely important. And I've only really like doubled down on that recently. So,
That's a great point. I have known several coaches who Facebook was their whole thing, and then
mhm.
something happened, or some post landed weirdly, or some censor came through, and they got their entire group of thousands and thousands, even tens of thousands of people. The list is gone. Like you said, you don't own your
Mm-mm.
content on
No.
other platforms. Your mailing list is yours. So I
Yes.
think yeah, that's
Y-
something a lot of people forget about or don't realize that anytime it could be taken
Yeah.
from you.
Yeah. I mean, that's why moved over to LinkedIn because, well, yeah, once Elon Musk bought Twitter and there are a lot of people leaving, I was like, I'm going to lose this is the only platform I have. I'm going to lose it. So I was like, I am at least just going to try to, people were at that point also looking for alternatives to Twitter and like not wanting to
Yeah.
be on there. So that's when I hopped ship over to LinkedIn, which is, I think, in general just like a much nicer platform to be on. But yeah, I wish I would have been like growing my email list this whole time. But I still have like 5,000 people on it, which is like not bad for just doing it for a little while for sure.
Yeah, and it sounds like LinkedIn in general, it was a much better fit for your topic specifically and the people you want to talk to.
Yeah, I mean, I like I grew pretty quickly on Twitter when it was like academic Twitter, and that's where like all of the academics hung out. And there are still people there, but it's like I could post the same thing on like LinkedIn and Twitter before and get like lots of engagement on both platforms. And now people on Twitter are just like not particularly interested in career advice. I think if they want that, they'll hop over to LinkedIn. So I'm also just struggling to figure out what is actually what do people want to see on X or
Mhm.
Twitter anymore? Like, what's going to resonate with people? So I might just like completely change like content directions there. But it's just kind of like in the back of my mind for right now. LinkedIn, I think in general, like LinkedIn followers are more likely to spend money than any other platform. So that's also why I would prioritize that over something like Instagram.
That makes sense. You mentioned, looking at these trends of LinkedIn and
Hmm.
your messages on X and, your conversions on your website. How do you track that stuff generally, and how often do you look at those?
Yeah, so I use Fathom Analytics for my website traffic, and then I'm currently using, I guess it's Kit now, was ConvertKit for my newsletter and email marketing. Um, I use Circle for my program, and I really like Circle. They're building out their marketing features on there, so I suspect at some point I will just completely move over there to track my or to manage the marketing side of things. I check. I don't like I feel like I at least just like glance at it every day. I send my newsletters out on Tuesdays, so that's also when I like check my open rates and things like that. Um, and then with like LinkedIn, I use a plugin called Authored Up, which I really like because it allows you to preview all of your posts and see like formatting wise like how long they are, and then also gives you all of the analytics like impressions and
Mm.
things like that, so you can go back and I can be like, okay, what was I posting a year ago? Was any of it any of it good? Can I reuse things like that? Because when you're doing content creation, it is a very, very long term game. and you will be repeating yourself over and over again and get bored of your content way quicker than the people who are following you.
Yeah, that's something people I think forget is that you may have said this 10 times in different ways, but the person who's looking at it right now probably didn't see the other 9. And even if they did, it takes, what is it, like 7 to 10 for them to even like for it to land over there and for it to
Hmm.
work and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think a lot of us get bored. Like, I've already said this.
I know. I try to keep it like interesting. I know that I I really like writing, and I don't use AI to like write posts. I can tell when something has been written by AI. It is very obvious to me, and I think that's kind of like the quickest way to, I don't know, have people just feel like this is just generic and boring and doesn't
Yeah.
really add a whole lot of value. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I like read the news a lot. Like I've I mean everywhere from like Forbes to the like Chronicle of Higher Ed, just to see what people are talking about. And if you can even just say the same thing but like attach it to a new story that's come out, then that's a way that I try to keep it like more up to date and current. Um, but but yeah, I think your strategy ends up changing a bit like as you get more momentum. And I think at some point I spend a lot of time on my LinkedIn content. I think I will probably spend less time on it at some point and just really double down on my own website and like email and all of that. But I haven't quite figured out the best like content repurposing strategy yet. That's something I struggle with.
I like what you said about taking your same message and being like, "Look, I'm not the only one saying this. Like, look, it's supported.
Yeah.
It makes sense." That's cool.
Yeah. Or yeah, I mean something that I struggle with, but I try to do more often is take like, you know, someone in my program will like send me a message and be like, "Oh, I really like this module was like really good. I learned this thing. It's like changed my perspective." Like screenshot that, like anonymize it, and then use that in a post. So that's, you know, it's a testimonial, it's social proof, it's soft selling my program. And so I found that doing that and just talking about my program more, talking about the fact that like I do resume reviews and I do one-on-one meetings, and I think people sometimes aren't aware that you are actually like that there's anything that they could buy from you, and you just need to like talk about your talk about your offers more. And that's been hard coming from an academic background where you don't really talk about sales or marketing or profit or anything like that.
Right. So, tell me more about using those testimonials and how that's affected your business.
Yeah, I mean, um I used to use like a testimonial plugin, and now I just have people write me recommendations on LinkedIn because you it is attached to someone's account, so there's no way that I can like use AI to like fabricate this at all. Like you can see that, and then I will take those and I'll put them on my website. But social proof is, I mean, if you read, uh is it Influence is the book. One of like the main principles of influence and persuasion is social proof. And so having other people vouch for your product and your service, like that's better than anything that you could say, saying that it's good. I mean, it's the same reason you go on Amazon and you're like, okay, which product has like the most reviews and like the most 5-star reviews? I'm probably going to buy that thing. And you would
Right.
probably not buy something that doesn't have any reviews at all, that is like untested, unless it were significantly cheaper or like exactly what you were looking for. But it's having these like really nice reviews that people have written for me, has been great. And I struggle to ask for them, but it's something that
Mm.
I I try to do with everyone who's been through my program.
Yeah, people love to give their opinion too when asked, and I think that we forget that, like, yeah, of course they're not being strong armed into it.
No.
They're happy to.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you've given some insight into what might be coming for you in the future.
Hmm.
So you also mentioned, the raising the price of your program. So what's your program at now, and what do you
Yeah.
expect to be happening, not just price wise, but through the structure of your business as you grow, as you hire, as you
Hmm.
expand, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So right now it is you can either pay monthly. So with like the basic tier, it's a 6 month program. It's I think it's at 75 a month, or you can pay and get a slight like percentage off of that, a one time payment. So that ends up being somewhere between like 900 and $1,000 for a 6 month program. And that's and in terms of like work for me, I do office hours every week. I have co-working sessions. People can also ask questions in the community and I answer them. If people want more help from me, like you want me to read your resume as as many times as you want to meet with me, you want to do like interview prep with me, then that's you can upgrade to that, and that is at I believe like about 21 to 2400, depending on how you pay for it, and that's also 6 months. I'm I'm toying with the idea of whether I want to continue with that higher tier or not in the next 6 months as I do this contract. But that's the current structure right now. I it's interesting because I don't ultimately know like what price with this niche like people are willing to pay. No one has I would say no one has really successfully like taken over this particular niche. So there's not really another model that I could look for and be like, oh, this seems like really successful. I should do that. So that's part of why I feel like I'm just stumbling around in the dark a bit. Um, in terms of the future, I've been talking to some folks at one of the big at the American Psychological Association, which is like the big psychology association, about seeing what a collaboration could look like if they were to work with me and have this program kind of baked into some of their learning and development resources. That's like super preliminary, but that's like potentially a direction that this could go. I think that the problems that we are facing in higher ed are so systemic that I feel very ill equipped as an individual person to administer this program at like a very, very at the scale that it would likely need to be administered on. I also have people from like around the world in my program, so having resources from an organization like that would be helpful for scaling because ultimately, what I think I would like to do um, is do more like writing and thought leadership, like this, not about like PhD career transition specifically, but about like human development and personal growth more broadly. Like my PhD's in developmental psychology. I think about these questions a lot. And I don't know. I always thought it would be fun to be a thought leader and publish books and give talks. And business coaching really appeals to me. Like I said, I did think it was important for me to be certified as a coach because I don't know that I have all of the tools that I don't have all the tools that I could have to like really serve the people who are working with me, especially because a lot of them are coming to me in states of burnout or just like really bad like mental health states, and I just want to be better equipped to help people move through this like challenging phase of their life. Um but yeah, so those are like the things I'm toying around, but it's all who knows where things will go. Everything's changed so quickly, even in a year.
That would be a huge partnership to move forward
Mhm.
with. Yeah, but then there becomes, okay, now this thing is too big for one person, right?
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, and right now it's like I know I see a lot of PhDs who have like messaged me and are thinking about starting their own businesses. I do think that coaching is a space that would be fulfilling for a lot of people coming from academia because you have this mentorship piece, this education piece. Um, Running a lab in academia is kind of like running a startup. It's like running a business. So I think there's a lot of overlap there that people would be interested in. And so business coaching intrigues me a lot. But I don't know. I just have a lot of interests, and being, contained in this one space feels very limiting to me. So I do see myself broadening out in the years to come for sure.
Mm. What about short term? What about like in the next year? What do you expect to happen? I know it's just
Yeah.
kind of you never know, as that's kind of how it's
Yeah.
gone. But any inklings, any thoughts, anything like that?
Yeah. I'm still kind of like toying around with the best like structure of my program, but I think what I'm doing starting this week actually is I'm going back to like a it was evergreen for the last couple of months, but I think I'm going to go back to like a cohort base.
Mm,
So opening it up to add some urgency and scarcity, and like a deadline for people. So at the beginning of the month, there's 10 to 15 spots open. Once they're gone, they're gone, and then you have to wait another month to get in, and doing it that way. I know multiple other people who have like moved to that kind of model, um, because just having it evergreen. I think unless you have like a lot of volume to your website, it can be hard to sell those kinds of those kinds of offers in an evergreen way. Um, so that's what I'm planning to do starting this week. Also, finally, I'm going to be starting this podcast because again, I think nurturing people more like in emails, podcasts will ultimately be, I think, really helpful for people just to see to see more of me before they're like, spending hundreds of dollars to work with me. And then those are kind of like the big things. Like I said, I have this contract that will be 6 months with a high probability of extension. So we'll see how that goes. Um, and I hope that I can make time to blog and like work on these book ideas that I keep like spinning around in my head.
mm. The cohort model sounds like it would also give you the opportunity to potentially take breaks if instead of evergreen, we're just like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
no one's signing up for this whole month. Or just we're taking a pause on that. Whoever in it is in it, that
Mm-hmm.
kind of thing. So right now, just to make sure I understand, are you not doing any sales conversations? It's just go to the website and sign
I
up?
I have never done sales calls, and I will probably never do sales calls unless in like getting coaching certification and then doing if I am doing something that's more like one-on-one, then like maybe, but I have no interest in doing sales calls. So I've never done them.
That's such a unique model where like you're extremely successful with zero sales conversations with you
Hmm.
or anyone else. They
Yeah.
just and like you said at this point, very little nurturing. Just
Yeah.
show up. Do you want it or not? Like
Yeah.
sign up or not. That's
Yeah. Yeah.
incredible, Ashley.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I think, because just like being autistic, it's like one-on-one conversations can be if I imagine if I did 15-minute discovery calls, that could be all I'm doing like all day long.
Totally.
And I think I've seen other people do it to where I you have to go through like some more extensive process before you can even book a sales call, but I don't know. I think I'm a much better marketer than I am like a salesperson. And I've seen other people who have managed to sell offers in, really high ticket offers with just like a Google Doc and like no sales calls. So
It's
um
outrageous.
yeah. So I think I think like right now, the the price point is not like high enough for me to feel like I need to do them, but like I said, I would do them if I ended up doing more like intensive like one-on-one coaching, because I would also want to make sure that that is like a good fit if I'm going to be meeting with someone like once a week for, 4 months or whatever it is. I need to make sure that that's going to be a good fit for coaching in that capacity, but right now just selling I guess like a community powered course, the sales calls didn't feel necessary.
Totally. Is
Yeah.
that something that you would hire out in the future? Those like quick 15 minuters to just like, here's what Ashley's course is about kind of thing?
Um, maybe. I think like at that point, like people want to hear from me. And I know that I've joined like other programs where, it was originally like just the creator, and then he ended up like outsourcing to other people, and then it's kind of like, but you're not really in this community anymore, but you're kind of the face of it. And I think that mismatch can be like challenging if you're like, well, I thought I would get a lot. I thought I would be talking to Ashley. I thought I'd be getting like a
Mm,
lot more interaction with her. And so that's like something I think about, but um I don't know. My intention is to I'll answer people's questions over DMs, like for sure, but I'm of the opinion that most meetings can be an email, and there's I really do not like having a lot of meetings, so
a lot of
I'm
fluff.
reluctant to do sales calls.
Totally. Um, so pivoting a little bit, we've talked about some of the mistakes and things you learned from
Mhm.
them. Tell me about some of the great decisions you made and the super successful things you did and what you learned from those.
Uh, that's a good question. I think that's harder for me to answer. I think one thing I did kind of, I guess, inadvertently was in the 2-ish years prior to launching anything paid, I had built up a lot of trust with people by giving a lot of value for free, like giving away everything for free. And so then when I announced like, hey, I'm starting this program, is anyone interested? I had 200 people message me and ask if they could
Wow.
join. And that shocked me because I was like, maybe 10 people, like maybe I'll get 10 people. And but like I said, I think that was from people just I had never I had never charged anything before, so I think and so I had built up a lot of trust and a reputation at that point. I'd also, done a lot of I was am a user researcher, and so talking to people and understanding like where are people struggling, like what are their pain points, and I went through this experience myself, so I also had a really good understanding of how hard it was. I think that allowed me to a just create better content and b create a better program. And I think it does stand out from other people in the space who, they finished their PhD and kind of went right into coaching and never actually, applied for a job or like worked outside of academia. And I have like I've had like 4 successful like job cycles now of like applying for a job, so I understand like what is required to get a job and how it works. Um, and I think the other thing that I really like writing, and people have asked me like, "Oh, where did you learn copywriting?" And I'm like, I'm trying to like learn more formally about it now, but I do think that my writing resonates with a lot of people, and that I think like learning writing and learning copywriting for social media, for emails, for everything, and telling your own personal story makes you like way more relatable because people don't want to buy from like a faceless brand. They want to buy from people and people who they resonate with. And I think I'm pretty good at marketing. And I think that's how I've managed to jump ahead of other people who maybe have more experience than me in the space or have been doing it longer, just because my marketing is better than theirs.
So some of the skills that you listed that you went through, user research,
Mm-hmm.
copywriting,
Mm-hmm.
marketing,
Mm-hmm.
what other skills have you developed as you've created this business?
I think the thing that's been hardest for me, and I think also just the thing that I've struggled with for most of my life, is just listening to my like making decisions and like putting on my CEO hat and like trusting myself and like looking at the data and making a decision. So like for instance, like moving to this cohort like once a month model, I had thought about doing this like a few months ago, and then I had talked to someone who and they like talked me out of doing it, and I was like, okay, I like won't do it because they didn't think it was a good idea, and I just listened to them. And then in retrospect, I'm like, but I'm the person running this company. Like I should like I under like I mean that's the thing is like you'll get a lot of business advice. Like there's so much business advice, and it will like you have to pick and choose like for you and your niche and your business, because business advice is like there's business principles, but like advice is not a one size fits all thing at all. And which is, I mean, circles back to something we were talking about, like all the like people who are like, oh yeah, like create like your own course and make like a bunch of money. And I'm like, yeah, but you have like hundreds of thousands of followers. Like, of course you're making a lot of money. But like not everyone can just like slap up a $200 course and all of a sudden be
Yeah.
making like seven figures. It's not, that's not how it's not going to work in like every niche, especially if you're just starting out. So I think trying trusting yourself and then also not being afraid to pivot. I've re-recorded my curriculum like four different times. I've changed like so much about my program because of student feedback. I've, I think not being afraid to pivot and like kind of look at the data and listen to the data. Like I didn't want to offer a standalone resume service for a really long time, but resume posts are the ones that I post on LinkedIn that perform the best. And so I
Mm,
know people really want like just a resume review, which I have like a lot of feelings about that, but this is what people want. So you have to give people what they want and then try to encourage them to buy what they actually need, which is,
mm.
you know, you need to reflect more on like what you actually want before you create a resume. You need to network. Like that's going to make a bigger difference in writing a resume and all these other things that people don't really want to do because it's a lot of effort.
Yeah, I've heard from a lot of people about this concept of meeting your leads, your clients, your potential clients at where they're at and the struggles they think they have and the
Mm-hmm.
thing they think they need, in this case being look at my resume, but what's underneath that, like you have to have that initial thing and like meet that
Mm-hmm.
need and then be able to talk about the fears under the fears or the problem under the problem or like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, here's a resume, but it's not you. Like, what are
Yeah.
you doing here?
Yeah. It's like, yeah, you've created a resume, but like you don't actually know. Like you're just applying to everything. You're just like, it's like, what job do you actually want? It's like, show me your LinkedIn. Like, what's been your experience of
Mm,
informational interviews and networking? And usually there's like a lot of other issues. Sometimes it is just the resume. Often, like, that is not the case, and there's like a lot more going on. Um, but yeah, it's interesting to kind of, you know, and I guess this also goes back to, where do I find people? And it's in this weird space where like academics don't really use LinkedIn. They don't really like LinkedIn, which is fair. I mean, LinkedIn is, it has its issues, but that's why I think prioritizing something like a YouTube or podcast or like being able to be searched in Google, that will also be helpful in like driving more people to just be aware that I exist.
yeah. Um, you've mentioned a couple different books, resources, coaches,
Mhm.
things that have influenced you, but what are some of the most influential things that we haven't talked about? Books, podcasts, resources, workshops, your coach training, all of that stuff, like
Mhm.
influential people you follow. What's influenced you a lot?
Oh boy, that's a good question.
Is it too
I am
big?
not. I am like I'm looking at like I just have stacks of books like on like all sides of me. Um, wow, that's a good question. So I I'd worked with my friends at Grey Wolves, GRAE Wolves.com, and they helped me with my branding because that was not something I ever thought about. So it's really hard when you're, just starting off in a niche and you're like, I think I get this question a lot from people. They're like, why would anyone buy from me? Like everyone, like there's already people here who are selling stuff. And it's like, well, there's something you have to, position yourself in a way where like you are the best only option for your ideal customer. And so they helped me to really, do a competitive analysis, figure out like how are other people positioning themselves, what's missing, and that helped me a lot to just figure out what direction I wanted to go in my business. So I credit them with a lot, especially trying to work with me. One of the founders is also autistic, so that's been nice just to figure out like what can I actually like handle, like what kind of business is going to be the best fit for me. um, I had found Justin Welsh is like one of the original people who built this business on LinkedIn, and I had read, he has like really great resources on his website, just kind of like basic stuff about getting started and building a niche. He also has, I think I've bought like a few of his cheaper courses, but he gives away a lot in his articles. So I think that's also just good for if you're looking for a place to get started. I've read Alex Hermosi's books. I wish I were listing people who weren't white men,
Mm,
but that's just how it goes. I'm like, what other books do I have on my desk? Um, I've read a lot of like career books. How to Be Everything is like a really good book. 'Cause it talks about people who have multiple interests and how do you combine that into a single career path. And so that's something that I've thought about a lot. Oh, I should plug the book that I'm currently reading, which I think is it's Stand Out by Dory Clark. Basically, anything that Dory Clark writes, I think is like really cool. But Stand Out is about like becoming a thought leader and how you determine your like big idea and ultimately like spread that to other people, because that's ultimately like where I would like to go. So that's something that I've been thinking about a lot too. um Influenced by, I think it's Robert Cialdini, is really good. It's like classic like marketing principles, like how do you persuade people. um those are the ones that are coming to mind off the top of my head. I read a lot of books, so
mm.
if I think of something else, I'll email you.
For sure, we've got plenty of room to add things to, and that
Cool.
typically happens after where someone's like, "Wait, wait, wait." Um, so where can we go to learn more about you?
um ashleyruba.com kind of has it all. But I obviously I'm on LinkedIn the most, and you can also just like search for me there. I have the benefit of there not really being many slash any other Ashley Rubas, so if you search for me, you'll find me.
Nice. Um, and then to sort of round it out, any last pieces of advice for coaches who are just getting started or who want to get started and are afraid to make the leap?
Yeah, like the leap from zero to like full time, or
Yeah.
yeah, like I said, I think again, I got really excited about my business in the early days, and then burnt out. But I think one thing, and Dory Clark also has a book that I haven't read yet called The Long Game. But what's helpful for me is remembering I'm going to be doing this for 10, 20, 30 years of my life. Like this is not like I'm going to hit like, seven figures in a year. Like it's just that's not going to happen. I mean, maybe it happens for some people, but like if you go in expecting like instant success, you're going to be like really disappointed. And I think it's just about, setting boundaries, showing up and doing a little bit every day and knowing that this compounds. I actually just wrote about this in my newsletter today. And there's this quote that I think of. I don't know who originally said it, but it's like we underestimate what we can do in a day. Or sorry, we overestimate what we can do in a day and underestimate what we can do in a year. So I think a year ago, this business did not exist at all. It just like didn't exist. And so when I think about the fact that like, oh, I haven't really like made as much progress as I've wanted to, or like I feel like I'm not making as much progress, I'm like, a year ago, this just didn't exist at all. So it's like, well, what can I do like a year from now? And that also helps me whenever if I write a post and it just like doesn't land, doesn't do well, I'm just like, I'm like, okay, I'm going to be doing this for another, you know years, decades. And so it takes the pressure off of any one post, any one email, um because you'll just be doing this for a really long time, and you'll get
Mm,
better.
yeah. Anything else you want to add?
uh Growth mindset really helps. I think for me, like this all feels like really hard, but I think at the end of the day, I do have like a very firm belief that I will figure it out at some points. Um, and having that, that kind of I guess like confidence or like conviction that, like this sucks, but like I will figure it out at some point. This will become worth it. It helps you get through the days where you just kind of want to quit. I think most people, like most businesses, fail in the first year, 5 years, for a reason, because it's hard. It's hard to create something of value that didn't exist before. So I think that is something my PhD program taught me. I think a lot of PhDs have an entrepreneurial spirit because we're doing something for 5 years that kind of sucks and you're just like failing a lot, but you like stick with it because you're like, I know I'll figure it out at some point if I just do it for long enough.
Awesome. Well,
Yeah.
Ashley, thank you so
Oh
much
yeah, of course.
for spending the time teaching your learnings to these new coaches, aspiring coaches. Really appreciate you sharing your journey with us,
Yeah.
and thank you for everything.
Oh yeah. No, thanks for talking to me.